Tonight's speaker is Kate Birch. She's an internationally known homeopath who lives and works in Minneapolis. She spoke to us a couple of months ago about the homeoprophylaxis, which is an alternative approach to preparing your child's immune system and educating the immune system so that it can handle the world out there and its infectious diseases. But tonight she is breaking some new ground with her presentation about glyphosate, how it can be affecting millions of people, I would say, millions and millions of people, many of them without knowing it, but affecting their health, affecting their gut microbes, which are very important, but a lot more than that, and maybe even affecting behavior and personality. I think it's very, very interesting what she has come up with, and she has a few copies, not as many as she wanted, of her new book called Glyphosate Free. So I am so pleased to welcome Kate Birch. Thank you.
Thanks, Leo. Thank you, everyone, for being here. This is the inaugural speech on U.S. ground on this topic of glyphosate toxicity. I've been in Turkey and just presented there in April, and was in Brazil last week, and we did some recordings. And as you know, Brazil is the #1 pesticide country in the world. They take up every pesticide that they don't allow in any other country. They're happy to take it. So I want to just sort of dive right in. Some of this subject is pretty complex, and I'm going to try to make it simple for us. And I don't also want to overwhelm people, because when you realize what glyphosate toxicity can do, then it's pretty overwhelming. Okay, so, you know, I started homeopathy in my own health 32 years ago when my son was about a year old. And I've presented so far on every one of the books that I've written. My first book was Vaccine-Free Infectious Disease, and then The Solution, and then I have a book on liver functionality, and my last one, it's a first aid acute care manual. And along the way, I've learned so much. And not only from my study in homeopathy, I've been practicing for 25 years, but also in writing books, but more importantly in my practice and people, and then through my own health. And a few years back, I started becoming overwhelmed with the number of vaccine-damaged children in my practice. And I started looking for some sort of solution on a much larger scale than just working with individuals in my office. And obviously writing books and going around speaking wasn't enough. I wanted to affect global consciousness. And I was looking for a substance that might have the possibility to do that. And I came across einkorn wheat, which is ancient grain wheat. And I have to say, there's a YouTube link here, and I have some postcards. There's a video of the proving of the einkorn wheat. I wouldn't have been able to take this journey to understand glyphosate toxicity unless I had done that proving first. And the information that came forth in the book, it's taken me the last year and a half to write it, is just so profound, and you sharing some of that with you tonight. So why did I write a book on glyphosate toxicity? Well, I moved here in 1998, and very shortly I went into symptoms of hyperthyroidism, and I didn't necessarily understand what it was about. In 2006, my children were enrolled at the City of Lakes Waldorf School, and we got a grant to build a garden, a flower garden, butterfly garden, And I ordered a truckload of farm soil to come into the school, and it was a 10-ton truckload of soil, and they deposited it right next to where we wanted it, and so I manually shoveled it over to where we actually wanted it. And within 3 weeks of doing that, I came down with sudden onset hyperthyroidism. My heart rate was beating at about 120 beats a minute. And within the next 2 months, I started losing weight. I lost 20 pounds. And I was bedridden, and I was so sick. And I'm like, how did I get here? What is this? I have no idea. I did my Vipassana meditation, I did homeopathy, I did all the things exploring into my own psyche, like, why am I sick? Like, what is my participation in this? And for 1 year, I continued doing that, and I was not getting better. I was getting worse and worse and weaker. And in the end, I succumbed to doing the allopathic medicine. As a homeopath, going to an allopath is like changing religions. I was like, oh my God, no. This homeopathy had always cheated everything for me, but I did. And along the way, I got mostly better. But I could not get off of the medication. I could wean it down to just a few grains of methimazole, but I couldn't get off it. It wasn't until I was at the Weston A. Price Conference 2017 that was held here, and I met Stephanie Seneff, and she talked about glyphosate toxicity, and I thought, oh my goodness, where was my exposure? I was kind of in denial about glyphosate exposure, but you're going to see that we're all in massive denial about this, particularly in the Midwest. So I'm just going to carry on. I started by detoxing myself. So I developed a protocol to detox myself, and then the book started with me just going, okay, I can just write up a pamphlet on the detoxification. And I started writing, and very quickly I was aware that, well, I needed to get some facts to back up what I was saying, and then I went down the rabbit hole. It's 283 pages, referenced on every system in the human body is affected by glyphosate. And even in the book writing, I found myself traveling to hell, and it wasn't a very nice journey going there. Even though I had cleared my body of glyphosate toxicity and was off of the medication, and my health was great. No hyperthyroidism. And so as I'm writing this journey of what glyphosate toxicity is doing, I knew I needed to save my own mind. And the book is a spiritual book, and it's about consciousness, and it's about reflection, and it's about how we are part of the golden ratio of perfect design, and how glyphosate interrupts that design, and we need to get back to it to allow it to naturally run through us. Anyways, it's a journey, so I'll take you on it. So glycine is a normal amino acid that is used in somebody's making noise over there. Can you stop that? Thank you. Because the recording is picking it up. It's an amino acid that's used in multiple functions in the body. And what glyphosate is, it's the amino acid of glycine molecule with an extra phosphate group. And we're going to learn about how it goes into the system. So it's all a bit microscopic, but there is a shikimate acid pathway that's in all bacteria and mitochondria of cells. And this shikimate acid pathway is a metabolic process used to make EPSP synthase, which is vital it's a precursor for a variety of enzymes, we're going to get there in a minute, that are used by harmful and beneficial bacteria, and they're used in plants for photosynthesis and to make folate. And folate in humans is essential for many, many functions. And lacto-fermenting bacteria in the intestinal flora also make ESP synthase. And when our body is consumed with glyphosate, or we eat glyphosate-ridden food, it kills off the lacto-fermenting bacteria. And the EPSP synthase is the biologic target of glyphosate. It also affects this other phosphoethanol pyruvate, PEP, which is essential for photosynthesis. And so they're using glyphosate as a defoliant, and without this PEP, that's how the plants die upon exposure to glyphosate. And now we are finding that there's glyphosate resistance in plants and bacteria by substituting alanine, which is another amino acid, in the place of glycine. And all genetically modified plants, well, they found in the Monsanto scientists found an agrobacteria found in the waste feed column of a glyphosate production facility, and they took the DNA of that bacteria and started inserting it into plants. So the plants were coding for alanine instead of glycine, and that made the plants glyphosate resistant. So therefore you could spray these plants with the glyphosate and it would kill the bacteria and the fungus and the other things, but it wouldn't kill the plant. So that's where GMO science came from. There's a version of CP4 EPSP synthase. So it's modified, it's put into all these crops. So let's talk a little bit about glycine. In order for the lacto-fermenting bacteria, the biosynthesis of folate, which is B9, tryptophan, phenylalanine, and tyrosine, this EPSP synthase is needed. Tryptophan is a precursor for all the neurotransmitters. Phenylalanine affects some neurotransmitters, but also hormones. And tyrosine is implicit in thyroid function and some others. We'll get there shortly. So glycine is also the scaffold upon which nucleotides are formed, which form the DNA and the RNA. And also glycine is there in the transcription and regulation of DNA replication. Glyphosate affects protein and enzyme synthesis and functionality, because instead of taking up the glycine, which is a normal part of proteins, it's going to take up the glyphosate, and then the protein or enzymes become non-functional. Glycine is the foundation upon which collagen is formed, and when you take up glyphosate instead of glycine, the collagen misforms. And one of the things that happened with me was all of the collagen in my spine started dissolving. No matter how many times I went to the chiropractor, the collagen was not holding any adjustments because it was basically dysfunctional. In animals, you see twisted growths in the hoofs. If you feed glyphosate-contaminated bread to Canadian geese, those Canadian geese babies will not grow wings and they will not fly out of here. Glycine serves as an inhibitory neurotransmitter by regulating the glutamate channels. So with excess glutamate, it leads to hyperactivity. It's a precursor for the antioxidant glutathione, so all detoxification pathways are interrupted, and not only the creation of glutathione is needed, B9 and folate and B12 are needed for that, and glyphosate eliminates both of those. And we got all that protein synthesis. So here we are in the Twin Cities, right here, little white spot. And this is from 2015 showing glyphosate usage last year come June when it was spraying season, I was so sick. I'm like, I have to get out of here. Is there anywhere I can drive to get out of here? And me and my friend, we drove all the way out here to Standing Rock, and the winds are coming from the west. And there, I felt better. On the way, we drove through the fields where they have these pristine yards in these beautiful Minnesota little towns with the white picket fences, and there's not a single dandelion growing anywhere. And in the corner store, they've got signs of Joe, who's got his little tractor. You can come around and spray your garden once a week with a glyphosate. And right outside of the towns are the yards that sell these huge machines that have barrels that they fill with the glyphosate to spray on it. And inside the towns, they've got kidney dialysis centers and cancer treatment centers. And there's 3,000 people living in these towns. And there's a story, Aunt Mary, she's just been diagnosed with cancer. We're raising funds for her, and that's also on the bulletin board in the little town. And it's just very scary that this many people can live with their head in the ground, not understanding, like an ostrich, what's happening. So these are some countries that glyphosate usage per millions of kilograms, and of course China is there. They make it. Monsanto's patent expired, I think, 98, and so then other companies were able to make it. US is right up there. Argentina, Brazil is there, India, Turkey, India, Poland, Thailand, Lebanon. I've got a couple patients in Lebanon, young girls who at puberty, they go into ovarian failure and hyperthyroidism because glyphosate affects the pituitary adrenal thyroid axis because of its change in the hormone structure or hormone functionality. Here's a little chart of usage by crops. Of course, corn and soybeans are the most, and they use this to feed our animals. So this is an excellent argument for becoming vegetarian or vegan, because basically those cows that are held in these feedlots that are shoved this food into them, their hoofs aren't growing properly, so they become crippled and maimed, and then if we eat that food, you never know what's going to happen. And it's very interesting. I am the only one that could have written this book because I've spent 25 years studying vaccine damage and understanding glyphosate's implication in RNA viruses and the immune system. This chart makes a lot more sense to me, but you see that the rate of autism is exactly equal to the use of glyphosate. Something else is happening. So there's primary targets of glyphosate. I said it has a stronger polarization and chemostatic potential than glycine across the membranes in response to electromagnetic differentials. Means even if you're eating good food and there's a little glyphosate in there, your body will preferentially assimilate the glyphosate instead of the other foods. And not only that they attach glyphosate to detergents. And the detergents open up the cell membranes to have the glyphosate go in further. That's actually how it can defoliate, because it's attached to those detergents. And you see so many people with environmental sensitivities to fragrances and perfumes and things like that, because those perfumes also have detergents, and what they're doing is activating this whole channel. But the primary place of effect begins with gut dysbiosis, as it's killing all the lacto-fermenting bacteria by disrupting the shikimate acid pathway. And this is also needed to access certain essential nutrients from the food that we're eating. We're going to talk in detail about all these different things. So it's going with the DNA and RNA. Most importantly with adenine, which then creates adenosine, which regulates the immune system. And also, adenosine regulates all the DNA replication. The coding for the enzymes becomes the glyphosate is absorbed instead of glycine, mitochondrial dysfunction for ATP production, because this is adenosine triphosphate. Immune system suppression, because adenosine occupies the adenosine receptor sites, which when those are suppressed, the immune system can't work. And in this immune system suppression, there's an upregulation of all RNA viruses, and lo and behold, the MMR vaccine, those are all RNA viruses. Same with some others, we'll get to them shortly. You have a question?
Yeah, you made a point about something, but I couldn't hear. Occupying.
The adenosine occupies the adenosine receptor sites. We'll get.
But instead of adenosine occupying that receptor site, what is?
No. Adenosine, excess adenosine. Excess adenosine, it's too much adenosine because glyphosate interrupts the enzyme that breaks down adenosine. Okay? And then also it affects the enzymes that create adenosine. We need both. The adenosine is needed to create the ATP. And anyways, we're going to get to all the details on that shortly. So the amino acids, tryptophan, phenylalanine, and tyrosine, which are the basis of all the neurotransmitters. Also, we have what are called guanosine protein-coupled receptor sites. Every organ in the body has these kind of receptor sites, and they're either functional by calcium, which glyphosate leaches, or glycine. And so with these receptor sites being non-functional, then these receptor sites take the neurotransmitters, so serotonin can work in the brain, also hormones. Acetylcholine receptor sites are these same G-coupled protein receptor sites. Anyways, glutathione. And MTHFR is dependent on glycine, and when hepatitis B vaccine, which is also an RNA virus, if it's upregulated by glyphosate, it's changing the effect of this MTHFR gene, and now the children aren't detoxifying the other vaccines that are coming. Right? So folate deficiency goes into, affects the glutathione production and produces a state of homocystinemia, which is excess homocysteine. Some of these things, I still don't understand the depth of the pathology of them. I'm just beginning to understand the mechanics of it all. And it can lead to heart disease and circulatory problems. Glyphosate also interrupts the metabolism of the purines, which is adenosine. So without being able to metabolize them down, you have excess uric acid, which leads to gout. You can also have vitiligo, that's an immune system issue. Anemia, insufficient hemoglobin, because it's affecting the enzyme that facilitates the absorption of iron. Gingivitis. The main is neural tube defects during pregnancies. Some of the tables I have in here, I have a homeopath who lives in Idaho where they grow potatoes and spray potatoes. And there's one chart that 16 in 23 pregnancies were miscarried at 4 to 5 weeks, which is when the neural tube is formed. So not only in mammals, humans is our neural tube, but also in worms and amphibians and all that live in the fields where the glyphosate is sprayed. Well, they're no longer living there. It can lead to cervical dysplasia because the wart virus is an RNA virus too. Inflammatory bowel syndrome, which will ultimately lead to celiac disease. How many people know people here who are gluten intolerant? Because tryptophan also is a precursor to the enzyme trypsin, which is needed to digest wheat. And we get also neuropsychiatric diseases there. So because of its effect on the lactofermenting bacteria, and if you've had any antibiotics in your life, you've upregulated E. coli, which initially it does help with some of it'll take over some of the metabolic bypasses we need, but eventually some of them start producing Shigella-like toxins and inflammation, diarrhea, and dysentery. Definitely it upregulates Candida, and all of the byproducts that are associated with Candida, which will load up you with PMS, loss of libido, painful intercourse, infertility, numbness, tingling, multiple sclerosis, Crohn's disease, colitis, inflammatory bowel, acne, lupus, insomnia. Anyways, it goes on and on. Excess Candida. Clostridial species such as Clostridium difficile, which produces a neurotoxin. So in many of the autistic children I see, this acetylcholine pathway is all about the ticks and then in the nervous system, and DPT vaccine is related with that. But sometimes I'll clear the DPT and I'll go, what's going on? And then I think, oh, it's Clostridium difficile. They'll get a stool test and that'll show, and it's affecting because DPT is tetanus, and tetanus is also Clostridia bacteria. So Clostridium tetani. Anyways, and then increased salmonella, which breaks down the connective tissues, and inability to digest fats and celiac disease, hemorrhages are there, and the Pseudomonas variants, which are a kind of bacteria that live next to the intestinal lining and borrow from the intestinal lining to grow a sheath around them to protect themselves. And this, when you're doing vaccine detox or cleaning up the kids with autism, one of the things that happens is that they will start passing these ropeworms, and some of them can be a foot long, some are a few inches long, or just they're very jelly-like. That's what they're called, ropeworms. So here it is about the purines and pyrimidines, which are the other pairs. So we've got the glycine-dependent ones are the purines. Adenine forms adenosine, and guanine forms guanosine, and that's used in the G protein-coupled receptors. And the pyrimidines are cytidine, thymidine, and uridine, and they form the cytosine, thymine, and uracil that's in RNA, the T's in DNA. And some other purines we'll find here. We've got theobromide that's in chocolate, caffeine is there, and even though this chart isn't showing it, nicotine is, and uric acid is there too. This is this one right here, which is part of the gout. We talked about that. So these adenosine receptors, they're located in the membranes of organs throughout the body. They are implicit in bronchial constriction, vasodilation, immune system suppression, or activation. There's 4 of those receptors, and one of the conditions I'm seeing in children that are growing up in these farm fields is that they will have asthma, where they'll go for a walk outside in the fields and then, oh, all of a sudden they're totally constricted and they can't breathe. That's the adenosine. The enzyme that's breaking down the adenosine is made malfunctional by the glyphosate, and so they're having this experience. And some of the gates are opened by copper and zinc. And one of the things particularly that happens with vaccines is this copper-zinc ratio gets tipped off, but also our food or soil. It has to do with right or left brain balance for learning, but the adenosine receptor sites are, can't remember, one of these activates and one of these inhibits. So, cannabis and methotrexate also activate these receptors. Means if the receptor is occupied by cannabis, adenosine cannot go on it. So cancer comes when those sites are completely occupied by adenosine. So CBD oil is a method by which you're occupying those receptor sites with something else, so that the adenosine isn't there, but the immune system isn't suppressed. And that's how cannabis can actually be curative in cancer. Methotrexate, the other way, it's immune system suppressant, so it does the opposite, and it's suppressing the immune system, so it's not fighting back. Caffeine and theobromide and nicotine can. So if you live a heavy caffeinated, chocolated, and nicotine diet, you're actually potentially saving yourself from the sites being occupied by adenosine. However, if the adenosine keeps building up and building up and building up, the cancer is going to grow in your body. So of course these are all leading to cancer. The cannabis and methotrexate, yep. Cannabis? Yep, methotrexate is an immunosuppressant drug they use in RA, they use in other autoimmune disease like that. So it's like a steroid, similar kind of immune system suppression. Is that right? Yeah. It's a what? Chemo agent, yeah, they use it that way.
But it's toxic.
Very toxic, yeah. Yeah, it's not going to help the situation. Glyphosate, adenosine, and ADA deficiency, that's adenosine deaminase. With the heightened occupation of these receptor sites, it leads to the bronchial constriction, vasodilation, immune system suppression. When that happens, the eosinophils and neutrophils can go higher, so you may come across somebody who has an elevated eosinophil or neutrophil count. They're not sure why. It's related in this. Because of these elevated accounts, what it's doing, it's elevating the IgE response. So you have allergic response and mast cell activation disease, and then the mast cell releases histamine, and so you have heightened histamine throughout the body. And it can lead to cytokine storms, which goes to the degranulation of the mast cells. And the clinical presentation is going to be allergic asthma, hives, or food sensitivities. And through the activation of the RNA viruses, you have the co-infections and chronic immune activation and the proliferation of cancer and tumor metastasis. So it was used as a defoliant because it interferes with photosynthesis, which is how plants generate ATP. As a pesticide, it interferes with the mitochondria's ability to produce ATP in human cells. That's the Krebs cycle, which results in cell death. That last summer when I wanted to get out of town, there was nothing wrong with me, but I couldn't get out of bed. I'm like, I have absolutely no energy. I feel horrible, like, oh, there must be some psychological issue that I haven't faced yet, you know, whatever it is, depression, life sucks, something like that. But it wasn't that. It was only in this state of being that I felt this way. And when you've got something that is so toxic to life, when I did my own glyphosate detox protocol, I was pretty exuberant once I figured out what I needed to do. And one of the things that I did is I went in a lot of saunas, and they had the Minneapolis Sauna Society. I don't know if anybody had the opportunity to frequent them. They had a pop-up portable sauna on Nicollet Avenue a couple winters back, and you could book your 2-hour block for $20 on their app, which I did, and I went once a week, and because it's stored in the collagen, all the heat just opened up the collagen, and that night my liver all of a sudden had to process all of this glyphosate, and I had the most blinding headache that I literally wanted to stand up and kill myself. I'm like, this is absolute hell, I just can't. And then it sort of managed, I got myself a remedy. I was laying on my right side, moaning, not moving. I'm like, okay, bryonia. And then it passed from my liver into my large intestine, and there my large intestine went into cramps like there were rocks in there grinding, and I was on my hands and knees at 4 o'clock in the morning, moaning, holding my head. And then I realized Colosynth is going to be the remedy for me, and I took that remedy, and then that morning I passed the stool, and it was this glue-like substance that had come out of me. And anyways, I recommend going a little slower on the detox, but the suicidal thoughts, I'm not a suicidal person, but literally all of my will was employed to keep me laying in bed, because I would have just gone and hung myself. I'm like, where is the rope? No, you're staying right here. Anyways, it's ADA is dependent on molybdenum and B12, cobalamin, and both are deficient in glyphosate toxicity. ADA cleaves the phosphate group from ATP, adenosine triphosphate, to adenosine diphosphate for energy usage. So without the ADA, you cannot cleave that phosphate group, and you don't have any energy. That's why you're laying in the bed going, what am I doing here? And then it is further reduced to inosine. So the adenosine, if you still have the excess adenosine that doesn't get reduced, that's the one that occupies the receptor sites. And here we have our corn, defoliating there. So here we are in protein formation, and our friend glycine, first the primary chain is the amino acid molecules put together based on, it's read off of the RNA reads the DNA and codes and says, okay, this amino acid, then this amino acid, then this amino acid. And then these chains of amino acids form in a helix similar to the DNA. And then based on the pattern of these, they form into tertiary structures, which are weak hydrogen bonds. And these hydrogen bonds allow for the functionality of the enzymes in heat or acid or different things they open or close. And then the quaternary structure is dependent on sulfur bonds. And there's an enzyme that's needed to break apart those sulfur bonds again for functionality. And it's these G-coupled protein receptor sites that are structured like this. And I do believe, I don't know, I can't remember, but it's whatever enzyme that breaks that apart makes it so that they're not breaking apart and they're not working there. So the extra phosphate group is interfering also with the folding of the enzymes and the proteins. And then it drives mineral deficiencies. So some of the G-coupled protein sites are called calcium channels, and they allow the calcium to travel in and out, and that's for muscle contraction, but also the brain. The acetylcholine nicotinic receptor sites are calcium channels. The glycine-dependent ones, that's glutamate. There's other. Some of them are activated by trace minerals that are depleted. And here's the acetylcholine receptors, too. So without tryptophan, phenylalanine, or tyrosine, the neurotransmitters go off. Depleted tyrosine affects the thyroid functionality, and it was my ability to convert T4 to T3. The enzyme necessary for that is dependent on tyrosine, and it was the functionality of that enzyme that led me in a hyper T4 state. I wasn't producing the T3. And then there's a kind of hemoproteins, which are also enzymes. They're called CYP proteins. They're all iron dependent. And one of the things is that, these are implicit in the creation of blood, bile acid and bile salts, and hormone creation, and also the thyroid enzyme functionality. And also here's one, heparin sulfate, for histamine metabolism. So if you've got the suppressed adenosine, excess adenosine, heightened allergic histamine response, your system also is not breaking down the histamine because of this heparin sulfate, iron deficiency, and so then you're in a chronic histamine state. And if anybody has food allergies, you'll recognize this pattern inside of you, and you're going, how do I get past this? So one of the most amazing things that I came to was the zonulin. It took me 4 months the index in here is 26 pages. It took me 4 months to go through that index over and over and over again, making sure that all the typos were correct. But actually, did I sufficiently represent some of the terms that I had in the book? And the first or second time I went through it, I get to the end and the very last word is zonulin. And I thought, well, that's a pretty fancy word, and it only had one entry. I'm going to do a little more research on zonulin. And so we'll talk about that. So if you eat wheat and you have glyphosate toxicity, you've killed the bacteria that creates the enzyme. But more than that, especially if you eat wheat that's been sprayed with glyphosate, for sure you don't have the enzyme to digest the wheat. When you eat a lot of wheat, it upregulates zonulin. Zonulin is a hormone that's excreted from the intestinal lining. And zonulin opens the tight junctions when it's upregulated. So the tight junctions are the gaps between the intestinal lining cells. And when those tight junctions are open, it's called leaky gut syndrome, which we've all heard about. And it's allowing food particles or toxins to pass through the intestinal wall into the circulatory system. And then, lo and behold, you have gluten in the blood. Wow, I wonder why it was supposed to be there. It's not. And systemic inflammation to wheat. So this is a path to celiac disease. But one of the pieces I discovered, because after doing the proving of einkorn wheat, I became fascinated. Einkorn wheat was a wheat that was first consumed by humans 5,000 years ago. And I thought to myself, when I came introduced to it, well, we're pretty messed up now. I wonder where the journey began. It would be great to go back 5,000 years and see if humans were a little bit more sane. And in the process, it cured me a lot of my modern society ailments and neurosis, and freed me to be a real human being and to live on this life. But because of this fascination I had with the wheat, I came across a number of other things. So first of all, the einkorn wheat doesn't have gliadin, which is the protein that we cannot digest, which the modern wheat has. But polio also is an ancient virus. Polio has been around for thousands of years. And polio, without the polio virus exposure, we never had epidemics until, the last 200 years, when we started to hybridize the wheat. Polio exposure in infancy is intended to down-regulate the tight junctions so you can digest wheat and there's no inflammation in the intestines. So, subsequent exposure to fecal contaminated water without that polio, allows the toxin to enter the bloodstream and cause paralysis by activation of the acetylcholine receptors. So in the 50s, what we had is Americans eating high amounts of wheat. They had received the polio vaccine, which does the opposite thing on the effect, as opposed to the oral polio, and then they're exposed to fecal contaminated water, and lo and behold, the neurotoxin is passing through the tight junctions and causing the paralysis. So one of the studies that I came across was that showed that introduction of OPV or oral polio at 2 weeks of age actually gave long-term health for these children. And this was particularly interesting for me because, with the homemade prophylaxis program, we have polio in it. And we had just placed it in there, and eventually we were going to phase it out because we're like, oh, polio isn't around. But everybody is wheat intolerant. Now we've started adding it into the program as the first remedy to close down the tight junctions, to keep that intestinal barrier intact. So it's inhibiting the enzyme needed to metabolize the wheat, upregulation of RNA viruses, tight junction, okay, we already did this. And then because of the tight junctions open, the undigested food is entering into the system, and now you're having system-wide histamine responses. And this is the number one problem why vaccines are an issue, is because there's food particles in vaccines and they are injected. They are not taken orally. So not only do you have infectious agents injected, the intestinal lining is the barrier of the immune system. And it's supposed to be the gate by which infectious agents don't enter into the body. And we've just injected however many we have. So the clinical presentation of glyphosate toxicity: primarily can't digest wheat, gluten intolerance, bloating from wheat, says they can eat wheat in Europe. Interesting, because they don't have GMO there, even though it's coming. Systemic food intolerances: headaches from wine or beer, blinding headaches before meals, right-sided headaches, or before menses, before your period. So they've tested wines. Even the organic wines in California are contaminated with glyphosate. There's no Minnesota winery that's glyphosate-free because of all the air that blows off. And so far, I have not come across any organic hops, so you can bet that all of your beer is contaminated there. Systemic inflammation can lead to gout as well. Lives in agricultural lands or works as a baker or farmer. I had one woman who came to me who's in Minnesota. She, 6 years ago, decided to become a baker, and she started working with this wheat and eating this wheat, and always was around the wheat and breathing in the wheat dust. And within 6 months, she had system-wide food intolerances, allergic response, histamine production, food allergies to every food that she ate. When she came to me, she was eating like 6 different foods, and slowly we started doing her detox, and I was writing my book on the way, so I was like, well, let's start with this and see what happens, and then, slowly we made our way through. Sensitive to smells and perfumes, unexplained bronchial spasm or asthma, systemic digestive or enzyme issues, skin ulcers that don't heal. One of the things that happened during the glyphosate detox, I was also doing yoga and getting rolfing done, and the rolfing was freeing up the binding in my fascia, and after every session I had a dumping of glyphosate into my large intestines, and one of the last places of my body that I really needed to work was all around the ileocecal valve. For whatever reason, it was choosing that part of my body to do that, and when it would dump there, it would pull my spine out of alignment, and so anyways, a lot of massage in this area has freed it up, but in that process too, I started getting these little pinprick ulcers that burned like acid, and they weren't healing, and it wasn't until and particularly after rolfing, because he'd work on one area, and then that area would break out in these ulcers. I mean, it's not a very pretty subject to talk about, but that's what happened. Chronic iron deficiency. During my menstrual cycle, I would have these blinding headaches with my hypothyroidism. And it wasn't until I did the glyphosate detox that those went away. Elevated histamine response, contracture of ligaments. I've got another woman, she's from Iowa, and she came to me is that every now and then her whole spine would twist so that she was in a torticollis position. And everything else she was talking, she's got brain fog, she can't think, she's got too much yeast, some headaches, food allergies, things like that. They live in the midst of farmland. I did glyphosate detox with her, and this went away. So endocrine issues, low sperm count, infertility, mitochondrial issues, adenosine, glutathione deficiencies, encephalitis, and brain cry. So when you have leaky gut and these now viral particles or food contaminants are circulating around the body, they're also attaching into the brain, and then opening up the blood-brain barrier is the ingredients in the vaccines, and it's allowing those vaccines to go on the brain, causing brain cry and encephalitis, and you're seeing all the hyperactivity, ADD and ADHD, and then the co-infections, herpes, Epstein-Barr virus, cytomegalovirus, Lyme disease, hepatitis B, and cancer here, history of vaccines. So how many people do we know are affected by this? The Lyme disease, I have a little interesting section in there because the possums usually are eating ticks, but the glyphosate, the possums aren't going into the fields because they're either getting killed or they're, the ones that survive are the ones that aren't going in there. And so then the tick populations are multiplying and then coming into the human populations, and then with the adenosine suppressing the immune system, your immune system is not able to get over the Lyme disease, and then you have chronic Lyme disease like that. Yes. Okay, so we're going to take some questions before moving on to the next section. And this really is an overview. There's so much more, and at one point in writing my book, I'm like, I could write 1,000 pages. At every turn, I'm like, well, what about that? And I found a research document and said, oh yeah, glyphosate, this. And then I go, well, what about that? And there was more to go. So, but what questions do we have now? Yes? Brain cry, it's called cryencephalique, and it's when there's inflammation on the brain. It makes the child goes, And if you see, I have a high number of Somali children in my practice. You'll see them walking down the street. I hear them coming across the parking lot, and there's swelling in the hindbrain. It's pressing on this section, and it's causing this high-pitched screaming. Yeah.
Are there any detoxes or flushes?
Yes, we're going to go into the detox after. I just wanted to get clear on where we were and then kind of clear the brain and, yeah.
There's a lot of exposure to microwaves as people are glued to their screens, and one of the things we're hearing is that is bad at the mitochondrial level and probably a contributor to cancer too. And there are a lot of other negative things. You could say there are a lot of enzyme poisons that harm enzymes. That's why they're poisons. Is a big part of it. So I guess the point is there's probably a huge synergy between the various mistakes of the person who has mercury fillings or who is, getting the flu shot every year or getting a lot of fluoride. They're harming a lot of basic systems too. So there's a synergy. The people who are at least trying to live a clean life are probably less at risk. Wouldn't you say that?
Right. So just to recap for the recording, that EMFs and technology, radiation coming from that is compounding DNA regulation or dysregulation, and heavy metal toxicity. Glyphosate upregulates heavy metal toxicity because it affects the enzymes that break down the metals. And then the bacteria, the toxins that are released is the bacteria trying to detox it out. Yep.
And so, for sure, it would impair your ability to detoxify anything else.
Anything else, yeah.
You need your glutathione to do that.
Yep,
One thing.
glutathione.
And you're not going to have your glutathione, so you're a sitting duck for a lot of other toxicities. It seems
Yeah.
like.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah.
My aunt has non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and she's associated with a class action lawsuit for glyphosate. Is that a cancer that's more prevalent?
The non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is the main cancer that's prevalent. It's elevation of the white blood cells or hyperproliferation. Then other blood cancer is deficient red blood cells. I mean, they work together, yeah. Yes.
So lung infections and co-infectors, biomycoplasmatic bacteria, I'm also thinking about parasites and how they will, sometimes.
Parasites?
Hide as well parasites besides parasites, it's also.
Yeah.
And so do you know anything about that in relationship to glyphosate?
Well, so parasites in relationship to glyphosate, so the reason these pathological bacteria propagate is because they can survive. Some of them don't need glycine, they use alanine, and the other is that they actually can, like E. coli detoxes glyphosate, it breaks it down. So, and the thing about bacteria is that all populations are transient based on pH value, dietary consumption, stress levels, EMFs, all different exposure. One thing that really surprised me when I came to the Einkorn, I started making sourdough bread and I read the directions. I had only ever taken antibiotics once, and that was 35 years before. I thought, oh, they say you just need to play with it with your hands and it gets the bacteria from your body. And I did this, and I'm like, and I got this weird stuff. It was in a sourdough. I'm like, that is so strange. And it was after the fact when I realized glyphosate even though I take probiotics and take yogurt and all these things, that my body wasn't holding that bacteria because of the amount of glyphosate toxicity. And a toxic environment will breed the things that, so if you look at the system, the world, the earth as a whole system, so, I mean, yeast is a fungus, a mold. It grows on rotting, dying tissue. And so yeast inhabits our body when it says, oh, this body looks like the life force is fading out. Our life force is the lacto-fermenting bacteria. The degree to which we are vibrant and healthy is the degree to which our lacto-fermenting bacteria is. And bacteria can mutate very easily. All viruses are thought forms, and they pass back and forth from bacteria, just like you and I pass back and forth thought forms. And some of those thought forms, if they go into our DNA, so hepatitis B thought form, it turns off certain things and changes the genetics. And what humans have done is unwittingly completely unraveled the system that's held us together, from the vaccinations, from the toxins, we're destroying our environment left, right, and center. People are crazy. Minnesota is pretty sane, relatively speaking, but you hear some of the stuff, the fake news, that's like DNA that has gone off the charts. There is no truth regulating that DNA, and it's just nonsense. I don't know the answer to it.
Just another aspect of it is, I'm gathering that you don't have to be touching the dirt where the glyphosate is or handling the crops, but if you're there breathing things, just through being by the field,
through breathing, exactly,
you're going to get an exposure. Say something about it.
Yep, exposure. So they say that glyphosate is water soluble. It should pass right out. I found different studies done by different universities that said was it passed out in cow's milk to their babies. And there's conflicting studies on that, and I can't remember the answer but it's the air contamination that we all are exposed to, and it drifts in here from the west. There is no escape from it, and it was aerial exposure. I've always eaten pretty much organic. It was never, I'm a low consuming person. Sometimes I wasn't diligent about it. Since I did the detox, now I'm totally diligent about it, and I can taste it. When it's in the food, it has a kind of slippery taste to it. And yeah, if you lived on the West Coast, you wouldn't get it, except for through food, because the winds are all blowing from the west. But you can, and so here, actually the first chapter in the book is open letter to my state representative. And it's an invitation for the reader of the book to send a copy or write a letter to their state representative. And actually, this summer we'll be setting up a GoFundMe campaign, but if there's anybody here who wants to contribute to it, to ensure that every state representative gets a copy of this, the print cost is under $5, and so, 100 books is gonna cost $500. I don't know how many state representatives we have. But that's one of and to go state by state and have people. The great thing about this is that it affects everybody. It's in Cheerios. It's on the pumpkins that your child carves for Halloween because they want to kill all the green away. It's in all your animal foods. If your cat has kidney disease, it's because glyphosate is there. The cat's not urinating because it wants to ruin your house. It's because the glyphosate has damaged their kidneys. Question?
Is there a bacteria that will break it down?
An Actobacteria, yeah, those ones, the Actobacteria break it down.
Put those in your compost pile, will it break it down?
Yeah, I think so. I haven't studied soil ecology just yet. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Actobacteria, it's Acter, Actobacter, something. Okay, so how to detox something that becomes hardwired into the system, i.e. all your collagen and in your DNA. We talked about the detergents pulling through the lipid membrane and integrated into the DNA, proteins, enzymes, collagen, stored in your tendons and ligaments and fascia, destroys the biome needed to make the functional and detoxification enzymes, and you're now mineral deficient that some of those enzymes are dependent upon, and the protein gates are not working. Once it does get out of the system, it is water soluble. So once you've gotten it out of the cells into the interstitial fluid, and if you drink a lot of water, it is water soluble and it will go through your kidneys or either get dumped through the liver into the large intestine. So this is a picture from a movie called GMO Children. And this is a child who grew up in El Salvador and the tobacco farms where it's sprayed with glyphosate. And you can see from the look of this child that the glyphosate is hardwired into his entire system. He has a B-folate deficiency, a B12, B9, and cobalamin deficiency. There's neurotoxicity, but also the enzymes in his collagen. In a child like this, I don't know if cure is possible. One of my first cases that it dawned on me was glyphosate toxicity is a little girl. She's now 6. She lives out west. At 6 months of age, the family bought a farm. And as soon as they moved in the house, she started getting hives on her skin. And then the hives spread to what we call urticaria, and then it became systemic, and then she would be screaming, and by the time she was 3, she had head-to-toe eczema. And through understanding pathophysiology, I'm like, okay, it's a uric acid issue, it's a histamine issue, it's all these things, but I didn't know why or how. And then it's actually from her incurability under my care that made me go, okay, well, glyphosate must have caused this somehow. And then, looking at all the different pathways, it started like that. She is a lot better. It is not from me, certainly. The mother is very diligent and does a lot of different things to help the child's health. But one thing that was interesting is that the husband or the brother brought in a deer that they had been hunting, and they thought, well, we're going to eat wild deer. The wild deer is going to be good for us. Well, they noticed that day that all the kids were hyperactive and arguing and fighting, and I talked with her about that. I said, that deer eats the corn from the glyphosate-contaminated fields. And she asked her brother, because every time they get a deer, they cut open the stomachs to see what they've eaten, and sure enough, the deer's stomach was full of corn. So it was, they didn't escape it. So what do we need to do to clear the body? First of all, you need to adjust your diet to all organic, clean out your cupboards, throw away food, and mostly we want to stick with meat, fruit, and vegetables that are non-reactive in your system. Cut out all grains. So a lot of people are already in this kind of diet because that's the only one that they can survive on. And the meat for sure has to be 100% organic. And the citrus has a lot of enzymes and calcium and things like that that are helping the creation of the enzymes for your own body, for the detoxification pathways, as a precursors for the enzymes. The next thing is you want a high-fat diet, because the fat is going to help open up your lipid membranes so that whatever's inside the cells will come out. And that is paired with am I saying vitamin C down here? You need fat-soluble vitamin C, and fat-soluble vitamin C is a scavenger, but also vitamin C activates the absorption of iron, activates some of the other enzymes. And no grains or gluten, yes?
With vitamin C, is liposomal?
Liposomal vitamin C, or sorbitol palmitate. It's also called a sorbitol palmitate, as opposed to acetic acid. Palmitate, I believe, is the liposomal, yeah. So, digestive enzymes, there's one brand I use, is called Digestozyme, and even though you may be eating food rich in enzymes, but throughout the whole process, I mean, basically the toxicity happens because of the destruction of the enzymes, and when you're detoxing, you're going to be releasing, which is certainly going to destroy more enzymes. So you need to three times a day, so 9 capsules a day.
Which,
Digestozyme. It's called all of them. You need a complete balanced enzyme panel and whatever the food substrate that feeds enzymes to, like lactoferrin, that's going to help support the probiotics in fermented foods. So the great thing is, here in Minnesota, we have access to all this kind of food through our co-ops. I did take a copy of this to the Wedge. She never called me to say thank you. I hope she got it, and I'm going to go talk with them, because actually some of the co-ops don't have all organic food in there. They've got conventional, and we don't necessarily know what that means. One thing that I found is rose hips and hibiscus break down adenosine. So drinking rosehip tea, hibiscus tea every day helps to keep your blood clean and adenosine. Too much adenosine in the system makes you tired, and that towards the end of the day, that's what's making us tired. And then during the night, the adenosine deaminase activates when fasting activates adenosine animase. So fasting is a way to clear the adenosine from your system, but certainly this tea helps. Then you want to have bone broth. Where is that on here? Fat-soluble vitamin C, bone broth is at the bottom. So bone broth, daily, organic. It needs to be collagen. I took 1 scoop of collagen every day, a little hot water, had some apple juice. Supplements daily. You can also get it from seaweed and chicken broth, also fish bones. Collagen is in all of these things. And you need to massively supplement. And in the process, I also was doing yoga. So that's stretching. I would take the protein before the yoga, so that when I'm stretching the collagen, releasing the fascia, the glyphosate's being dumped and my body is taking collagen up into it. The onions and garlic are high in sulfur and selenium, which help in the creation of methionine, which then, with the B12 and folate, makes glutathione. At any point in time, SAMe, if you've heard of that, that's methionine. It's a great, people use it as an antidepressant, but it's also helping with the detoxification pathways.
What is
Methionine is methionin, and SAMe is a supplement. Yep, capital SAM, lowercase e, or maybe it's the other way around, one of the two. Yeah. So, what's that?
I think they usually pronounce it methionine.
Methionine, okay.
Methionine, yeah.
Okay, methionine.
Basic amino acids, and it has the cysteine in it.
Yeah, so it helps with the detox pathways. Yeah. So onions and garlic have, they're high, particularly the selenium, which also supports the immune system. So eat onions and garlic all day long. You can make a bone broth soup with onions and garlic. Pretty yummy. Massage, sauna, yoga, fascial work, lymphatic work, and bowel cleanse. If you've never done a colon cleanse, I recommend before doing the glyphosate detox to actually do a colon cleanse so that you know that your bowels are completely eliminating. Even colonics is one way. I do find that's a little bit violent on the system, but anything in the beginning that will prune juice every day, just keep those bowels moving. Yep.
With the enzymes, digestive enzymes, yes, with food, are you also recommending therapeutic value to take them on an empty stomach, like the protease or?
Yes, I would say take as many enzymes as you can. So also the fermented foods is live in enzymes. Kombucha has enzymes. Sourdough breads, some have enzymes. Pineapple, papaya, all of those things. Soy products, fermented soy is enzymes not cooked, except for we want to make sure it's organic soy, not GMO. Yep. And what's the time like? Okay, how much time do you need to spend doing this? So in the book also are tables that goes into describing all this, and it sets a time and a trajectory. Depending on what your normal diet is, I would say spend 2 weeks cleaning up your diet, then spend 2 weeks entering into detoxification before entering into using, we have homeopathic remedy of glyphosate. And I don't know if it's possible to detox any toxin out without using the homeopathic preparation of that. We have a similar protocol with mercury amalgam to detox amalgam out of, and 10 years ago or 5 years ago I did the mercury amalgam detox. And I also found that you can do one level of detox in the beginning, but then a few months later your body is going to be releasing more. So then you need to do it again. Because the initial time of doing it, it's only going to release what's on the surface. And then later more is going to come. And this detox protocol takes 8 weeks to go through the remedies. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 2 weeks at the 30C. Then the next Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 2 weeks at the 200C. Then 1M, these numbers are potencies. And then the 10M. Again, and particularly on the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesdays, to be super diligent about your supplements. And in the beginning, I too, as the remedy helps you detox. So during those days, you're going to feel kind of sick and whirly and different symptoms. That's as the glyphosate is surfacing. The bodies know how to heal. This is what, my faith in creation saved me in writing this book, and that's why there's golden ratio on the cover, and I talk about DNA and I talk about consciousness, because when we see truth, we know truth. We are all a part of that truth, and that truth is outside of us. It's creation. And so creation will work through us if allowed. And when you show the body a homeopathic remedy of a toxin, the body says, you're right, that's a toxin, and it will eliminate that toxin. And we go through the ascending potencies of it to clear it at the physical level, the functional level, the energetic level, and the astral level, if you can say. And in so doing, it clears us. I mean, humans have been fascinated with their self-annihilation for about 100 years now. Or maybe we've been waiting for Armageddon ever since the Bible was written, I don't know. But, so we're kind of on the brink of it, and we got to figure it out. Are we going to do it or not? And clearing us of these poisons in our own thought forms of, do we deserve to live? Are we significant enough on this planet? all of those things, we have to get rid of those thoughts. Goes into this. So,
Where do you get the glyphosate?
the glyphosate, you need to go through a practitioner who can get it from a pharmacy. Yeah. So far, it's not over-the-counter product. You can also use the remedy Roundup. Oh, and then going back here, it says intercurrent remedy. So with the practitioner who understands what's happening, so in some cases I've been using the polio to close down the tight junctions. And before I did that, the very last symptom that I was suffering with was this kind of bloating. Every time I ate food, I was just like, and I didn't know if I was hungry, and my stools were just like, did it pass or not? I mean, it was not happening, and I said, so when I came across the video of the polio helping immune systems of babies, I took polio myself. And right away, I noticed that my tight junctions shut down in my intestines. I felt it. I felt my intestines firming up. I felt the stool passing normally. And what that intestinal barrier is about, it's a barrier of discernment. What is good for me and what is not good for me. And if you have a healthy barrier, your body will also throw up what's poison and will diarrhea out what's poison. If you don't have that, then it all gets in your body and seeps into you, and you can't think for yourself. You don't know right from wrong. You'll listen to anybody, what they say. Your immune system is overrun. All these things. That organ of discernment is vital for our survival. It's one of the first, as the neural tube forms, the gastrointestinal tube forms, and it's right there in our own creation. Okay. So, any questions? Yes, Anna?
Will clay or charcoal absorbable? Is there a polarity?
Yes, clay and charcoal will bind it. So during the detox phase, you're taking the supplements. The thing about taking clay and charcoal, when you take the supplements, it will absorb that. So I would do the 3 days of the nutritional detox, the supplemental detox, and then maybe get a massage or do hot yoga, and then do clay and drink lots of water, because your body's going to be dumping and you want to absorb it and pull it out like that.
What about when they're spraying? Is it a good idea to take clay?
When they're spraying, yep, and also magnesium sulfate baths is going to clean your body that way too, yep. Mm-hmm.
Which is Epsom salt.
Epsom salts, yep.
What about diatomaceous earth? Does that make it?
Diatomaceous earth, yep. The silicates are very helpful in the detox process. Isn't somebody in the back had a question?
Yeah, so how do we clean up the earth that's got all this on it?
How do we clean up the earth? This is, farmers are needed to explore this. I don't know how it breaks down. I don't know the science of, how do they join it together? The phosphate and the glycine is basically that, but there are intermediaries in the way, and actually one of the pieces in there I found that the intermediaries are more toxic than the glyphosate. So, yeah. Is it in the rain? It would be if they sprayed. Is it go heavier than the air? I don't know. I think it falls to the ground.
It does.
Yeah, falls to the ground.
It does, yeah.
Doesn't go up.
And I think it's kind of like DDT, and that's a very persistent thing that stays in the environment for
Yeah.
a long time, and that's one of the really bad things.
Persistent, stays in the environment.
Persistent.
Yeah. So we probably need some fancy bacteria to help break it down, and funguses and molds, because those are the things that like to grow in the body if you have glyphosate toxicity. Mushrooms do amazing things. Yeah.
Just allowing the fields to just sit for 5 to 10 years maybe?
Allowing the fields to sit. I wonder what growing cannabis would do in the fields. Sunflowers also supposedly clean up the fields. Letting them sit, but I think it's better to actually have some plant base that's growing there, to like a vetch or I'm not a farmer to know these things, but that's what I would say. Yes.
Certainly scalar energy, like radionics.
Yes.
Sophisticated farmers who know that technology will broadcast their fields to both clear and then build.
Clear and build with scalar energy. Great. So we need, Leo, you need to bring some farmers in here that know how to, what about Will Winter? He knows how to clean up land, probably some ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you look at wise tradition, what are they all about? Natural farming
Yeah.
methods, raising animals that don't eat GMO corn and soy and, everything's sustainable that way. And they're right on target, aren't they?
Yep, wise tradition, right on target with sustainable agriculture. We need it, we need to demand it. We need to, our stores, we need to ask questions. We're too polite, don't want to offend, don't want to come across as a crazy lunatic. Fortunately, compared to the vaccine world, which as you may know is a crazy argument, and me being in the, I'm like, used to keep my mouth shut because I don't want to get in an argument or persecuted for that. But glyphosate toxicity, I'm pretty sure everybody can get on the bandwagon with this and without fear of reproach or reprimand. But just start simple. What do you feed your kids? Just start there. Go to the stores, ask, do you have organic? Even the wedge, I'm like, where does that come from?
Yeah.
All your farm-raised fish is fed GMO, corn, soy, glyphosate-contaminated salmon. Sorry. Farm-raised shrimp. I used to think I was safe with shrimp. Not safe with shrimp. Question, sorry.
Well, Will Winter is connected to a friend that is growing an enzyme product called Pam and Sam out of Inwood, Iowa.
What's the name of the enzyme?
Pam and Sam.
Pam and Sam enzyme, okay.
So super enzymes, and preliminary studies are showing that it is clearing up glyphosate.
Pam and Sam are clearing up glyphosate, that's great, in the soil. Good. Yes.
Okay, so I'm someone with a biochemistry background.
Yes.
And I'm struck by what an incredibly simple molecule this darn thing is.
Yes.
And it's an organic molecule. And, as far as I would organic chemistry. And yet, how menacing. I mean,
How simple it is and how menacing. Yeah, somebody said, well, if those bacteria can adapt, can humans adapt? Well, if we didn't eat glycine, we wouldn't be humans. And glycine is implicit in every biologic function in the body. I don't know what we can do. Yeah.
Back to the soil, what about remedying the soil? What about fermenting waste vegetables, like, cabbage that's...
Fermenting the vegetables for the soil?
Acidophilus bacteria, and then dumping it on the soil.
I would think that would help, yep,
And
fermenting.
compost is fermented too.
Compost is fermented and heats it up, yep. This is one question I had because I was getting horse manure and making compost piles with horse manure. And I'm like, oh my goodness, all those horses are fed, they're bedded on glyphosate sprayed hay, and they're fed these grains. I've been importing glyphosate into my garden, god damn it.
But I mean, you got rid of all of our eggshells and all of your vegetable scraps, and just composted that and
Put that on the garden, yep. Compost. Yes.
Do you want to say anything more about the einkorn wheat?
The einkorn wheat. The reason why it helped me be able to tackle this journey was it connected me with consciousness in such a profound way that on my card, if you watch the video, you will be connected to consciousness. Consciousness that was sourcing through me in writing this book. I mean, I'm a smart person, but I'm not that smart. I was opening a door and the information was coming through. And there were times where I'd get up and I'd go outside and my brain was just like, more and more information was coming. We have access to all consciousness at all time, and we are so blocked. We have those G-coupled protein receptor sites allow us to feel the environment, allow us to feel heat, the sun, can sense somebody's mood and emotions. They're in our palms, they're in our body, and these coupled receptor sites are clogged. They don't function. We're numb, dumb, shut down, and in my own clearing process is they've just become awoken, and the einkorn was the first step in that. So if you're ready to take the journey, watch the movie, and I can hook you up with a remedy too.
What's the website for that
Einkorn, there's a YouTube link on this postcard right here.
Okay.
Yep. It's called Paradise Lost and Found. If you enter that into Google search, Paradise Lost and Found, and my name, Kate Birch, you'll get to the YouTube link, and then you can watch it as free. Yes?
Comment about the, I have quite a background in fluoride and mercury, since these
Yes.
are big dental poisons. And mercury, I mean, I've heard Boyd Hayden lecture on this, a mercury scientist, and it opens up the tight junctions in the intestines. That's
Mercury opens the tight junctions, yes.
damaging aspects of it. And fluoride, this is not, most people don't know this about fluoride, but fluoride will dysregulate the G proteins that are, on the cellular receptors.
Fluoride interrupts the G proteins on the receptors, yeah.
So it'll upregulate some things and downregulate
Yeah.
some things. So it leaves you with an abnormal thyroid and other organs, because they operate through signaling that uses these G proteins.
Yeah.
There's a fair amount of published science, but it's really suppressed. So you cannot.
These things are suppressed. Yeah.
Very hard to publish this research, but there's a Czech researcher named Anna Strunica, and she's one of the leaders in the world in the effects of fluoride on G proteins. But there's an overlap in what I'm hearing about glyphosate that I already hear about the harm that fluoride does.
Yes.
And I think you could say some of the same criticisms of fluoride in terms of affecting the personality
Yes.
of people. So you're dysregulating the operation of the human body with all the fluoride exposure you're getting in the drinking water, it's in the toothpaste, and so on.
It's been a cumulative. First it was the mercury, then it was the fluoride, and then it was the vaccines, and now it's the glyphosate. And we're just so dysregulated. And going back to the einkorn is Christ, when he handed out his wheat wafers, that was einkorn wheat, and he said, "This is my flesh." And Christ, this consciousness that Christ had, he was trying to communicate to humans what it was like to be one with the earth, one with what there was. I had the opportunity this spring to go to Turkey, into central Turkey, where the caves were, where the early Christians in 600 AD were living, and they have painted on the walls Christ touching people and healing people with the energy coming out of his hands. And this is one thing that I accessed through the einkorn wheat. The wheat was given to humans along with polio. You guys become agrarian, and the whole monetary system was created. Anyways, the einkorn wheat is a journey into the downfall of humanity. Yeah.
Besides the spiritual
Yes.
if you will. Is there like therapeutic value to the high-corn wheat and a
Yes. Therapeutic value, yep.
So it's not only a grain that people can tolerate, it's actually a benefit.
When you start eating einkorn, your digestive system will recalibrate. It's also, wheat is the, Demeter is the goddess of fertility, who's the wheat. Yeah, and so it's all about women and hormonal cycles and balancing and miscarriage and breastfeeding and the mother-daughter connection and the female energy that the earth is providing for us that has been so tipped out of balance. It's bringing back femininity or whatever that female energy is. So I'm gonna end recording, and then we're welcome to ask questions after. And I have some books, and if first come, first serve, and then I will take a book order for those who want.